The morning air was crisp in Liberty Ridge, Montana, as a crowd of hikers gathered at the trailhead of their beloved Pinecrest path. Their chatter fell silent as a heavy metal gate rolled across the dirt path, clanging shut with finality. A bold red sign hung from it, white letters glaring, "Private property. No trespassing. Trespassers will be prosecuted." Below it, another sign declared, "Trail access permanently closed." A woman in neon hiking gear shouted, "This is public land. You can't do this." The crowd murmured in agreement, but their indignation paused as a man stepped from behind the gate. He wore a faded hunting jacket, scuffed boots, and a calm expression that belied the storm brewing. "Actually," he said, his voice steady, "I own this land now. Bought it last week. This trail runs right through it." The hikers erupted in protest, but two figures pushed to the front. Ellen Whitaker, a sharp-tongued retiree and president of the Liberty Ridge Homeowners Association, HOA, and her ally, Victor Langston, a lawyer with a slick comb-over and a perpetual scowl. "This is outrageous," Ellen snapped. "You can't block our trail." "I can," the man replied, holding up a stack of papers. "This land was privately owned, and now it's mine. Every inch." Victor reached for the documents, but the man pulled them back. "Call your lawyer before you touch what's not yours." Ellen's voice trembled with fury. "Why would you do this, John?" He locked eyes with her. "Because 3 weeks ago, your HOA fined me $12,000 for hunting on my ranch. So now, no more hiking." With that, John Marshall, a 44-year-old former Marine, locked the gate, turned the key, and walked away, leaving the crowd stunned. John's story began months earlier when he bought a 60-acre ranch on the edge of Liberty Ridge, seeking solitude after years in the service. The ranch was his sanctuary, a place to live off the land, far from bureaucracy. He hadn't known he was near an HOA, and he certainly hadn't joined one. Liberty Ridge was divided. One side held tidy 1-acre homes under the HOA's iron grip, while the other boasted sprawling private ranches like John's, wild and free. His neighbors were a mixed bunch. There was Clara Thompson, a kind widow who welcomed him with a peach cobbler, and Hank Larson, a cattle rancher who became a fast friend. Then there was the HOA board, Ellen, who ruled like a monarch, and Victor, her enforcer, whose legal threats came as naturally as breathing. At first, the HOA's complaints were petty. Ellen sent letters about John's visible wheelbarrow, despite his lack of trash service. Victor once claimed John's cattle violated community standards. John chuckled and ignored them. But everything changed one crisp fall morning during hunting season. John, in his orange vest with a valid mule deer tag, tracked a buck across his land. He moved silently, rifle slung over his shoulder, until he spotted his quarry near a creek. The shot was clean, the buck dropped, and John began field dressing it. Suddenly, voices shattered the quiet. 3 hikers, phones out, filmed him from a hill. "You can't hunt here," one yelled. "This is my land," John called back. They didn't listen. They called the sheriff. 2 deputies arrived, recognized John, and checked his deed, license, and tag. "You're good, John," one said. Someone didn't know where the HOA line ends. John thought that was the end of it. A week later, a letter arrived from the Liberty Ridge HOA, notice of violation, unauthorized hunting activity. They fined him $12,000 for endangering residents and demanded he stop hunting on shared community lands. John was livid. His ranch wasn't in the HOA, and the creek was deep within his property. He stormed to their next meeting, Hank at his side, and slammed the letter on the table. "I don't live in your HOA," John said. "I didn't hunt on your land. This is my ranch, and I have the right to hunt on it." Victor smirked. "Our residents use trails near your land. Your hunting threatens their safety." Ellen added, "We can't allow weapons so close to our community." "Then move your community," John shot back. "I'm not moving my deer stand." The board upheld the fine. John refused to pay. The HOA's retaliation was swift. Hikers began trespassing on John's land, leaving trash and scrawled insults. Someone spray-painted Deer Slayer on his barn. A hunting camera was smashed, boot prints circling the wreckage. John stayed calm, documenting every incident, but he knew he needed a plan. Then he discovered a secret. The Pinecrest Path, Ellen's pride and joy, was an HOA property. It ran through 40 acres owned by a defunct logging company, now for sale. John visited the county office, confirmed the records, and made a cash offer. Within a week, he owned the land and the trail. He kept his purchase quiet, installing trail cameras and subtle no trespassing signs. One Saturday, he watched Ellen, Victor, and a group of hikers set off on their usual route. John followed at a distance, waiting until they were deep in the trail. Then he acted. He drove metal posts into the ground, hung bold signs, and chained the gate shut. When the hikers returned, their shouts echoed through the pines. Ellen's face twisted as she saw John holding the key. "You can't do this," she screamed. "Actually," John said, "I can, and I did." Victor called the sheriff, smirking. "Let's see how long this lasts." Minutes later, 2 deputies arrived. John handed over his deed. The lead deputy scanned it, then turned to the hikers. "You're all being cited for trespassing. This is private land, and you crossed a posted boundary." Ellen's jaw dropped. Victor's smirk vanished. John watched as the hikers lined up, handing over IDs like chastised schoolchildren. That night, Hank brought a 6-pack to John's porch. "You did it," he laughed. "Bought their precious trail." "They crossed the line," John said. "I just drew a new one." But the victory was short-lived. A letter appeared on John's gate. "You may think you've won, but we're not done. Liberty Ridge, HOA Legal Counsel." John tossed it into his fire pit, but unease settled in his gut. The HOA wasn't backing down. The days following John Marshall's bold move to close the Pinecrest path were deceptively quiet. The trailhead stood silent, the new gate gleaming under the Montana sun. But John knew better than to trust the calm. The Liberty Ridge HOA, led by Ellen Whitaker and Victor Langston, wasn't the type to slink away. They were plotting, and John braced for their next move. Trouble came swiftly. One night, John heard a metallic clank near the trail gate. Grabbing his flashlight and rifle, he crept through the darkness. The chain was intact, but fresh scratches marred the lock, and deep boot prints scarred the mud. Someone had tried to break through. John's jaw tightened. He installed motion sensors and floodlights, and for good measure, adopted a massive black German shepherd named Titan. The dog's keen nose and deep growl became John's new line of defense. 2 days later, a notice arrived from the county. Complaint filed. Misuse of land and environmental disruption due to unlawful hunting and land obstruction. The document, stamped with the HOA's letterhead, accused John of threatening wildlife and blocking long-standing recreational rights. John blinked at the audacity. The same day, the Liberty Ridge online newsletter published a scathing article, "Outsider Shatters Community Harmony." Without naming him, it painted John as a reckless loner, blasting guns near families and destroying a cherished trail. The comments section exploded with outrage, though a few defended the rancher. Hank, ever loyal, warned John over coffee. "They're turning you into the villain. Watch your back." John nodded, his mind racing. He doubled his security, hiding cameras in fake birdhouses and setting Titan to patrol. Then came a chilling discovery. Checking his trail cams, John spotted footage from 3:13 a.m. 2 hooded figures dragging black trash bags and a jerry can near his fence. A flicker of flame appeared. They were setting fire to brush under his private property sign. John jumped in his truck, heart pounding, and reached the spot in minutes. The flames were small but growing. He stomped them out, coughing in the smoke, and spotted something glinting in the dirt. A gold HOA pin with VL scratched on the back. Victor Langston. John called the sheriff. Deputies photographed the scene and bagged the pin, but without clear footage of faces, they couldn't charge anyone. Still, the incident shook John. The HOA had escalated from fines to arson. He reinforced his defenses, but the HOA struck again, this time with bureaucracy. One morning, John stepped onto his porch to find a construction crew at the trailhead, bulldozers idling. A foreman waved a paper. "We're building an emergency access road for the HOA. It goes through your lot line public easement." John scanned the document, signed by a county official, but the survey lines looked off. His phone buzzed. It was Hank. "Get to the assessor's office. They're trying to redraw your boundaries." John sped to the county office, his gut screaming danger. He'd learned to trust that instinct in the Marines, and it hadn't failed him yet. At the assessor's desk, he demanded records for his parcel. The clerk, a nervous kid named Tim, pulled up a file. "There's a revision request to adjust a utility easement across your land. It'd let them build that road. That utility line doesn't exist," John said, leaning over the counter. Tim hesitated. A field survey should have verified it. Who filed the request? John asked. Tim glanced around, then tilted the screen. Filed by Victor Langston, Liberty Ridge, HOA. John's blood boiled. They'd faked a survey to carve into his land. He snapped photos of the screen, grabbed copies of his deed and trail purchase, and drove home, fury fueling him. This wasn't defense, Anna Marie, it was war. Back at the ranch, John drafted a complaint to the county's land use department, attaching every document. Then he called the local paper, the Liberty Sentinel, and tipped off a reporter named Sarah Klein. She arrived the next day, camera slung around her neck, eyes sharp with curiosity. You own the trail? She asked. Lock, stock, and barrel, John said, unlocking the gate. They tried to build over it. Now they're faking records. Sarah's article hit the next morning. HOA bullies veteran over land rights, but he owns their trail. The story went viral locally, sparking petitions to dissolve the HOA. Readers praised John's stand, though some called him a troublemaker. The tide was turning, but Ellen and Victor weren't done. They held an emergency HOA meeting, barring John. Clara, the kindly widow, called him afterward, her voice shaky. They showed a video, John. It made you look like you threatened to shoot hikers. That never happened, John said, his heart sinking. I know, but they edited it. Took your words from that hunting day by the creek. Some believed it. John realized the hikers who filmed him months ago had been setting him up. The HOA was painting him as a menace to force the county to act, maybe even seize his land. He had no choice. He called a lawyer, Tom Bradley, a land use expert with a southern drawl and a knack for crushing rogue HOAs. Tom grinned after reviewing John's file. They're cornered, son. We'll file a cease and desist, toss their land grab, and sue for defamation and harassment. That night, John's floodlights blazed. Titan growled, and John grabbed his rifle, circling the barn. Red spray paint dripped across his house. You don't belong here. The vandals were gone, but the message was clear. This was personal. John reported the vandalism, but the sheriff lacked proof to act. So John set a trap. He posted a fake HOA meeting flyer behind his fence, hinting at secret plans. 2 nights later, Titan's growl woke him. The monitors showed Victor creeping along the fence, snapping photos of the flyer. John flipped on the floodlights and shouted, "Smile, Victor." The lawyer bolted, but John's camera caught him in full color. The next day, John filed the footage with Tom's cease and desist. Victory seemed close until a county notice arrived. Zoning board hearing. Violation of community safety codes. The HOA claimed Titan was a wild animal hazard, and John's hunting created an active weapons zone too close to homes. They wanted Titan banned and John's hunting rights stripped. John stared at the letter, the weight of their vendetta sinking in. This wasn't just about land, it was about breaking him. John Marshall stood in his bedroom, buttoning a clean flannel shirt and tugging on his best jeans. The zoning board hearing was set for 9 a.m., and he wasn't about to show up looking like a drifter. Titan, his loyal German shepherd, watched from the rug, sensing the tension. John left the dog at Hamino, need to give the Liberty Ridge HOA more ammunition. Hank Larson, his friend and fellow rancher, met him at the truck. Ready to take him down? Hank asked, clapping John's shoulder. As ready as I'll ever be, John replied, though his stomach churned. The HOA's latest move accusing him of safety violations to ban Titan and his hunting rights felt like a desperate swing, but a dangerous one. Ellen Whitaker and Victor Langston had proven they'd stop at nothing. The hearing took place in a cramped chamber at Liberty Ridge's City Hall. Ellen and Victor sat at a long oak table, papers stacked like a fortress. Ellen wore a severe black dress, Victor a stiff suit, both radiating defiance. 3 board members faced them, led by Chairman Walter Grayson, a gray-haired man with a no-nonsense demeanor. John and Hank took seats in the back, ignoring the glares from HOA supporters. Grayson cleared his throat. Mr. Marshall, you're here regarding a complaint from the Liberty Ridge HOA. They claim your property poses a threat due to firearms, an aggressive animal, and obstruction of historically used community land. How do you respond? John stood, his voice steady. I live outside the HOA. My land is private, and I have every right to hunt legally. Titan is a certified protection dog, fully registered. No laws are broken. Ellen interrupted, her voice sharp. He's threatening residents. That dog barks constantly. We've had dozens of noise complaints, and it charges the fence when anyone passes. John clenched his jaw. Titan's a guard dog. That's his job. And I've never received those complaints because they're fabricated. Victor rose, holding a remote. We have evidence of Mr. Marshall's intimidation-armed patrols, escalating tensions in our peaceful community. He clicked, and a projector displayed photos. John with his rifle on hunting day, Titan barking at the gate, even a still from John's security footage of him holding a flashlight. The images were twisted to paint him as a menace. Where'd you get that footage? John snapped. That's from my private trail cam. Victor smirked. Public safety overrides privacy. That's a lie, John said, but Grayson raised a hand. Mr. Marshall, do you have documentation supporting your claims? Grayson asked. John handed over a thick folder. His property deed, hunting license, Titan's registration, the cease and desist against the HOA, and footage of Victor trespassing. He included photos of the vandalism you don't belong here in red paint and the Liberty Sentinel article proving the Pinecrest Path was never HOA owned. They're mad because I bought their trail legally, John said. They lost control. The room fell silent. Grayson flipped through the documents, pausing at Victor's trespassing photo. Ellen shifted uncomfortably. The board whispered, then Grayson spoke. We'll review and issue a decision in 5 days. Mr. Marshall, avoid public confrontations until then. I've never started one, John said, but I'll finish them. As he left, Ellen hissed, You won't win, Marshall. You're just a stubborn nobody. John turned, smiling faintly. I'm a stubborn landowner. Don't forget it. The next 5 days were tense. John reinforced his fences, added solar-powered lights, and kept Titan on high alert. Every creak at night set his nerves on edge. On the 5th day, a courier delivered the board's ruling, no violations found. Mr. Marshall is within his rights. John exhaled, relief washing over him. But Hank arrived that evening, his face grim, waving a flyer. They're not done, Hank said. Ellen's pushing an HOA expansion to extend their boundaries right over your land. John scanned the flyer, filled with lies about crime spikes and wild animal risks caused by his ranch. If the county approved the annexation, John would be forced into HOA rules. No hunting, no Titan, no freedom. This can't be legal, he muttered. Not yet, Hank said. They need homeowner votes and a public hearing. John called his lawyer, Tom Bradley, who didn't hesitate. We'll fight this 2 ways. File an injunction to block annexation and dig into their finances. HOAs like this often hide dirty money. Hank chimed in. I know a former board member, Diane Foster. She quit after clashing with Ellen. She might talk. Diane, a sharp-witted woman in her late 50s, met John at her cabin. Ellen's been rigging records for years, she said. Fake surveys, inflated costs, and contracts to her cousin's company. That's how she stays in power. She handed John in a mail-in internal HOA memo accidentally sent to her before she left. It read, Once we force John Marshall into the HOA, we'll mandate compliance and lien his land if he resists. They plan to bankrupt him. John recorded Diane's words and passed the email to Tom. They filed a fraud complaint with the state HOA Oversight Division, targeting Ellen's schemes. But before John could savor the offensive, sirens wailed at dawn. Smoke curled from his back pasture. He sprinted toward it, Titan at his heels, and froze. Flames roared up his storage barn, devouring the wooden wall. Beyond the smoke, a shadowy figure vanished into the trees. John grabbed a hose, but the pressure was weak. He yanked a fire extinguisher from his workshop, spraying foam until his arms ached. The flames slowed but didn't stop. Then sirens blared. Volunteer firefighters skidded in, hoses blasting. We've got you, John, one shouted. In 10 minutes, the fire was out, but the barn was charred, tools ruined, and feed gone. The fire chief frowned. Any idea what started it? Someone said it, John said. I saw them run. We'll call the sheriff, the chief said. Deputies arrived at sunrise, combing the ashes. John showed them the scorched private property sign and the trail cam footage, a hooded figure at 2:14 a.m., flicking a lighter into hay. Something glinted on their wrist, a silver watch, just like the flashy Rolex Victor wore to every meeting. That's Langston, John said. The sheriff shook his head. Can't confirm without a face. We'll question him. That afternoon, an envelope appeared at John's gate. Inside, a lawsuit from Ellen and Victor, claiming John caused emotional distress and endangered the community with military tactics and attack animals. John laughed, but Hank wasn't amused. They're trying to bury you in legal fees. John wasn't worried. Tom had filed their lawsuit first: fraud, trespassing, harassment, defamation. They had Diane's testimony, Victor's trespassing footage, and now arson evidence pointing to him. John rebuilt the barn's defense's new lights, alarms, and Titan's free reign. But a call from Sarah Klein, the reporter, changed everything. "John," Sarah said, voice shaky, "someone sent me HOA financials. Ellen's been embezzling over $140,000 funneled to a shell company." John's jaw dropped. "You're sure?" "Positive. I'm sending the files." John forwarded them to Tom, who chuckled. "Game over. We've got enough for criminal charges." The revelation of Ellen Whitaker's embezzlement sent shockwaves through Liberty Ridge. John Marshall sat on his porch, Titan's head resting on his knee, as he processed Sarah Klein's files. Over $140,000 siphoned from the HOA's coffers into a shell company tied to Ellen's nephew. It was the kind of scandal that could topple empires or at least one overzealous HOA. John forwarded the evidence to his lawyer, Tom Bradley, who wasted no time. "This is our kill shot," Tom said. "We're adding criminal fraud to the lawsuit." Ellen, sensing the noose tightening, went into overdrive. She flooded the HOA's newsletter with denials, claiming John had hacked their records and fabricated the documents. But the truth was spreading faster than her lies. Sarah's Liberty Sentinel article had ignited a firestorm, and an online petition to dissolve the HOA surged past 10,000 signatures. Homeowners began resigning, refusing to pay dues. Clara Thompson, the sweet widow, brought John banana bread and a sly smile. "You've lit a fire, John, and it's burning the right way." Ellen fought back at a public hearing, standing before the town board with a trembling fist. "John Marshall has destroyed our community's unity," she declared. "We were peaceful before he came with his guns and beasts." John took the podium next, his voice calm but firm. "I didn't destroy anything. You find me for living free, trespassing, vandalizing my property, and setting my barn on fire. You tried to steal my land." He held up a still from his trail cam. Victor in a hoodie, his silver Rolex glinting. The room gasped. Diane Foster, the former board member, stood in the back. "I served with Ellen," she said loudly. "She faked surveys, moved money, and silenced dissenters. John's only crime was fighting back." Whispers filled the chamber. The board chairman announced, "We're suspending all HOA actions against Mr. Marshall and launching a criminal investigation." John left the hearing lighter, but the real victory came that night. The sheriff called. "We found fingerprints on the gas can near your barn. They match Victor Langston." John's heart raced. The next morning, squad cars rolled into Liberty Ridge at 7:45 a.m., parking outside Victor's manicured home. Neighbors peeked from curtains as deputies cuffed him on his porch. "This is a setup," Victor shouted, his robe flapping. Ellen screamed, "He's our legal representative." The sheriff snapped, "Not anymore." Sarah Klein captured it all, her camera flashing. Her footage went viral, the headline screaming, "HOA lawyer arrested for arson in land feud." The community reeled, and John's lawsuit gained momentum. Tom froze the HOA's accounts pending the fraud probe, bolstered by Diane's testimony, Clara's statement, and Hank's account of the harassment. But Ellen wasn't ready to surrender. 2 weeks later, she pulled up to John's ranch in a gleaming SUV, stepping out in a fur-lined coat. "John," she said, her smile saccharine, "let's clear the air." "Unless you're confessing, there's nothing to clear," John said, arms crossed. She laughed thinly. "Let's not escalate further. The community's had enough drama. Drop the lawsuit, and I'll ensure the HOA leaves you Alanino fines, no annexation. We'll forget this happened." John stared. "You burned my barn, forged records, and tried to ruin me. Now you want a truce because you're losing." "It's business," she said, shrugging. "You play rough, we play rougher." John stepped closer. "Not anymore. Leave." Ellen's mask slipped, her eyes flashing before she spun and sped off, tires screeching. The civil trial began in a packed courtroom. Neighbors, reporters, and state HOA regulators filled the seats. Victor, freshly bailed, sweated in a gray suit. Ellen sat rigid, her pride intact, Tom laid out the case: fraud, trespassing, harassment, defamation, arson, and attempted annexation. He played Victor's trespassing footage, Diane's recorded testimony, and the sheriff's arson report. The fire chief, county assessor, and Sarah took the stand, corroborating John's story. John testified last. "I came to Liberty Ridge for peace," he said. "But they fined me for hunting, vandalized my home, and tried to burn my livelihood. When that failed, they tried to steal my land." Victor avoided his gaze. Ellen's defense unraveled. Victor pleaded the fifth. Ellen blamed him entirely. The jury deliberated briefly. The verdict was unanimous: guilty. Victor received 3 years in prison and was ordered to pay $45,000 for the barn's damage. Ellen was fined heavily and banned from HOA boards in Montana. The court dissolved the Liberty Ridge HOA for mismanagement and fraud. Cheers erupted as John shook Tom's hand. That weekend, the community celebrated at John's ranch. Clara baked pies, Hank grilled ribs, and neighbors John barely knew thanked him. Titan sported a bandana reading Local Hero. As the sun set, John stood on his porch, a beer in hand, savoring the quiet. The trail stayed closed, his fences stood tall, and his land was his. But the story wasn't over. A month later, a letter arrived from the state: Citizens Honor Award for Courage and Protection of Property Rights. John smiled at Titan. "We showed buddy." Then came an unexpected visitor, Rachel Harper from the State Land Commission. "Mr. Marshall," she said, opening a folder. "We reviewed land claims after the HOA's dissolution. Your property includes an additional 12 acres, wrongly mapped as HOA land years ago. It's yours, including a spring, timber, and the highest point in Liberty Ridge." John laughed, stunned. "More land." Rachel nodded. "Legally and officially." John Marshall stood at the edge of his newly expanded 72-acre ranch, the crisp Montana air filling his lungs. The additional 12 acres, granted after the state corrected the Liberty Ridge HOA's fraudulent maps, stretched before him a pristine expanse of old-growth timber, rolling hills, and a bubbling freshwater spring. Titan, his black German shepherd, trotted beside him, tail wagging as if he, too, sensed the victory. The highest point in Liberty Ridge, a rocky outcrop with a panoramic view of the valley, now bore John's name on the deed. It was more than land. It was a testament to his fight. The dissolution of the HOA had left Liberty Ridge transformed. The county dismantled every trace of the organization. Their signs were torn down, their budget filings shredded, and their clubhouse listed for sale. Victor Langston, once the HOA's smug lawyer, was serving his 3-year sentence in a Helena prison, reportedly folding laundry instead of filing lawsuits. His appeals had failed, his reputation in tatters. Ellen Whitaker, the HOA's iron-fisted president, had vanished. Her home sold quickly, and rumors placed her in Idaho, starting over where no one knew her name. John didn't care where she went. Justice had been served, not by vengeance, but by truth. The community, freed from the HOA's grip, began to heal. Neighbors who once bowed to Ellen's rules now organized voluntarily, forming a neighborhood alliance with no bylaws or power grabs. They planted trees, repaired roads, and hosted potlucks, proving that goodwill didn't need a rulebook. To John's surprise, they asked him to join the alliance. "You stood up when no one else could," Clara Thompson, the kind widow, told him over coffee. "Help us build something better." John agreed, but with a condition. "No paperwork, no drama," he said, grinning. Hank Larson raised his beer. To John, rancher, veteran, and trail tamer. The table erupted in cheers, and John felt a warmth he hadn't known since his Marine days. But John had one final act of defiance and generosity up his sleeve. Using part of his $45,000 restitution from Victor, he cleared a new trail on his land, carefully routed to avoid homes. It wound along a scenic ridge, ending in a shaded grove where he built a sturdy wooden bench. On it, he mounted a plaque: "Freedom means standing your ground, even when no one stands with you." John Marshall. Then, in a move that surprised even Hank, John opened the trail to the public. "Not because I had to," John told Clara, "but because I chose to." Word spread, and the Liberty Ridge Freedom Trail became a local gem. Families, veterans, and tourists hiked its path, pausing at the bench to read the plaque. John often stood at the trailhead, tipping his hat to visitors. "Welcome to Liberty Ridge's true trail," he'd say, a quiet pride in his voice. The trail wasn't just a path. It was a symbol of what he'd fought for, a reminder that freedom, hard-won, could be shared on one's terms. 6 months after the trial, John's life settled into a rhythm he dreamed of when he bought the ranch. Mornings began with coffee on the porch, Titan at his feet, the valley stretching out in golden light. He hunted when the season opened, tended his cattle, and rebuilt his barn stronger than before. The state's Citizen's Honor Award hung framed in his living room, its words praising his courage, perseverance, and protection of private property rights. John didn't display it for bragging rights. It was a quiet nod to the battle he'd endured. The community's transformation continued. The neighborhood alliance thrived, hosting barbecues and cleanup days without a hint of coercion. Clara organized a book club, Hank led a volunteer crew to fix potholes, and even Diane Foster, the former HOA board member, joined in, her sharp wit now used for good. Liberty Ridge felt like a town again, not a battlefield. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, John sat on his porch, Titan's head in his lap. The air was still, the only sounds the distant lowing of cattle and the rustle of leaves. For the first time in years, John felt peace, not just the absence of conflict, but the presence of something deeper. His land was his rights secure, his neighbors true. No fines, no threats, no HOA lurking in the shadows. He thought back to the early days, the petty letters, the $12,000 fine, the spray paint, the fire. Each blow had tested him, but each had also revealed allies. Hank's loyalty, Clara's kindness, Diane's courage, Sarah's tenacity, Tom's brilliance. They'd stood with him, not because they had to, but because it was right. And in the end, right had won. John's gaze drifted to the Freedom Trail, its path winding into the dusk. He'd built it for others, but it was also for himself, a marker of the line he'd drawn, the ground he'd held. Liberty Ridge was no longer just a place. It was a story, his story, etched into the land he loved. As he sipped his coffee, John realized something else. The fight had changed him. He was still the same Marine, the same rancher, but now he carried a quiet strength, forged not in battle, but in standing firm. He'd faced down bullies, exposed corruption, and reclaimed his freedom. And in doing so, he'd given Liberty Ridge a chance to start anew. The stars emerged, blanketing the sky. Titan sighed contentedly, and John patted his head. "We did good, buddy," he said. The ranch was quiet, the future bright. No HOA would ever threaten this land again. If this story stirred something in you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever faced injustice or had to stand up for what's yours? How do you view the role of violence, whether it's vandalism, arson, or even just threats in resolving disputes like John's? Share your perspective in the comments below, and let's discuss what it means to fight for justice in a world that sometimes feels unfair. Your voice matters. Tell us where you stand.